Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Just Roll It Already. I'm your host, Daryl.
I'm your other host, Jeremiah.
I am a guest host. I'm Kyle.
And I'm the fabulous rules lawyer, John.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, today is going to be Shop Talk, the small topic role plays. Today, our conversation material is consequences in a role-playing game. So, let's get going. So, consequences. Now, when we play games, I see a lot of the time, players do not whatsoever think about the consequences. They steal, loot, murder, rape, so on. And how do you guys think about controlling such things or dishing out the consequences according to it without making them feel like they're actually being attacked?
Oh, actually, in your game, when we did the whole what is real, the PTSD guy, right? Your road killed that one guy. Was he not arrested, or what happened to him?
All of them were arrested.
Yeah, and see, if you just go up and stab a dude in the eye, and you're in broad daylight in a town, that players should probably be arrested. Yeah,
Yeah.
You stab a dude in the eye, you're gonna get arrested.
Plus, it's an evil campaign. Then you should be punished for doing good acts.
Yes. Actually, that's a very interesting thing.
Well, even when you're playing an evil person, your consequence level may be dropped, but you still should be able to face consequences. For example, if you kill somebody in front of a lawman, even though you're evil, doesn't mean the law cannot be bent or changed.
Now, just to be clear, we're talking about rules of the world, or are we talking about consequences of the world, or more of a consequence of the campaigns?
Consequences of society in a campaign.
Okay, so
Because I was saying, prior to the podcast, I wanted to run in my campaign where let's say the players help some old guy, they gave him some money, and then they find months later, down the road in the campaign, he took that money, bought some magic scrolls, and became a prolific wizard, and just started doing evil crap. That's
because there's a very fine line between when you have consequences for the campaign and consequences within the game itself, i.e., like you were saying, the setting consequences. Some game masters will invoke a consequence on a player for deviating from the story, and that's the no-no.
separating the party, punishment.
Right, exactly.
Well, punishment more in the lines of, for example, let's take a modern setting. You guys take your guns, you break down a door, you shoot a guy down, you go through his stuff, you take his wallet, and then you run away. And maybe you don't have to sit there and have immediate consequences, but if you take a look at, okay, somebody just called in a gunshot. Then suddenly there is forensics everywhere, fingerprints, so on and so on. All their actions have to lead up to a single situation that would lead them up to becoming wanted criminals, for the fact that even though they may think they're good and they don't care because it's just an NPC, it still doesn't mean that these people cannot be punished for something outside of it.
Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a player that's smart and they take all the precautionary steps, because that's what's required at that point.
Yeah.
You use the gloves
To break the window,
You break the window with some duct tape so it doesn't make noise, and you garrote them in their sleep. And then it's easier to murder somebody that way, and you're wearing nurse's shoes, and you make your escape.
No, perfect example of this for those out there, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The one guy goes in, kills the narrator, and then throughout the movie you have the detectives,
forensics team looking at the body,
looking at the
widows
body,
weeping,
and at the very end of the movie they arrest all the knights. These modern day detectives come in and start cuffing all the knights. It's that should happen in a campaign. The players if they commit a crime, you should totally have guards and stuff on that.
And actually, on that note, that's something I absolutely love, is when characters do something at the beginning of a game and it affects them near the end or further into the campaign.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
It is.
Because consequences don't necessarily need to be negative either.
Well, even Kyle, in some of your games, you love to throw out consequences. You sit there and you put people through the ringer all the time.
Oh, yeah. If you do something good, you usually get something good in the end, unless the person you helped out was kind of in the head.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, consequences are amazing, especially when you don't see them coming.
Well, also there's even, thinking about it just now, there's also positive consequences too.
Yeah.
Okay, when you give money to a man who's down on his luck and he needs help immediately, and you give him a loan or something, or you just give him money, well, 5 months down the road, you suddenly see him, he's a millionaire because he invested his money, and he comes back saying, I couldn't have done this without your help, okay? I want to pay it back to you with interest. Just name anything you want. And then at that point, that's reward for people seeing, wow, I did not see that happening. And sometimes there's even a problem with people suddenly looking at that and saying, well, if I can get rewarded all the time.
Yeah, they'll try and abuse the system.
They will.
Yeah.
But you know what's great about this? It makes the machinations of the world so more dynamic. Like, it's just not an illusion anymore. It feels like when you turn
Feels
your
like the butterfly effect.
yeah, when you turn your head, everything that you cannot see in your vision doesn't exist, as like you might be believing. But with this, though, it makes you believe the world is actually doing stuff, even though you're not there. Just because you're not there doesn't mean stuff isn't happening. And that is a good way to integrate things into your campaign, is like the world is alive in your story. Therefore, even though the players aren't in a particular area, maybe have an ethnic cleansing from some foreign army come in and kill people. But you weren't there, so those people died. If you were there, you could have saved that
Roll
village.
a random event chart for nations.
Exactly.
Kind of like the last game that we ran a little while back. We decided to play SimCity inside of the castle, near the castle, and we didn't get out of the town. So
Technically, we were only an 2-hour walk. Like, we walked
Yeah.
2 hours, fell down, and this is where we make our claim.
Seemed like I had it predestined, like that you guys would hear about the town being burned down. Now, give you guys some background story. In my campaign, I had my players here in a town called Towerport. I expected them to go on an adventure and leave, but they decided 2 hours outside of town they found a cave, and they're like, let's make this our home. So that's what they did for like a campaign. So whatever. But like, I decided though, like prior to the campaign, though, like, all right, Towerport is gonna be sacked, and those players are gonna be like, wow, thankfully we left that town before it was sacked.
but no.
No, they stayed there, and therefore they met with the consequences of, well, not, and this I wouldn't say positive or negative. They met with the consequences of random disasters, of coming into the fact that there's a war going on. There's a full-fledged war. Like, you guys may have felt like there wasn't a war going on until it actually comes to your doorstep. Then it's like,
Yeah, I'll just become the White Death. That's all I have to do. White Death. Get shot 16 times and just, wake up one day.
not a lot of people think that. Like, when there's a war going on, most civilians don't feel like there is a war going on. They feel like they're, like, because they're not in it, they're like, well, there really isn't a war. And they can't see the consequences of how that actually plays out over the course of politics or just government building.
Well, most people forget about what's going on outside of their immediate life.
Eh,
It doesn't bother them. If it doesn't affect them, it's not part of what's going on.
narcissism.
Yeah, okay, these are all reasons why somebody would ignore consequences, but back to the point of the consequences themselves and being implemented in the game, there has to be a fine line between punishing a player because you want to punish them and actually having a dynamic outcome. For instance, you give the beggar five gold, he invests it, he becomes a millionaire. Or if you take a beggar's 5 gold, he dies from starvation, and then his brother comes and tries to kill you.
Or his ghost haunts you.
Or his ghost haunts you, one of the two, which is even worse.
Or like I said, like when you guys had your cave taken, that was not that was a
It
staging.
was kind of predestined, but we didn't know.
Exactly.
That's more of a behind the screen.
It wasn't me.
Stagecraft.
It wasn't me punishing my players. It was just very serendipitous and kind of good story actually. You guys kind of just got you caught up in the Civil War happening in my campaign. So it's like, well, that's kind of interesting how that happens.
And
Yeah, but how do you feel at times that you feel it dictates to implement consequences?
Like I said, I love the dynamic you can build. It will make your world look like clockwork. Like that, it's not just because the players aren't there doesn't mean stuff isn't happening. Like there's people living their lives, and it'll immerse people more.
Let me give it out a little better. How do you feel consequences should be dished out based on actions of the players?
Okay, that's a hard one. That's almost like a philosophical question.
It's definitely got to be a pinnacle event for whatever they're interacting with, i.e., breaking the rare Fabergé egg that's enchanted with magic that saves the city.
And then
Or like a person's temple, maybe that rewards off the spirits coming back to resurrecting the dead or something like that. Whatever nature, it has to be like pinnacle.
You want grandioso
Because once you
consequences.
tip it left or right, whichever way, once you tip the scale, then you get a consequence. But it's got to be pinnacle.
You want like big grandiose consequences. I like the butterfly effect where like I give the beggar 5 gold and later on
it doesn't
the
even
road.
have to be. It doesn't have to be freaking. Doesn't have to be huge. Like you give the beggar 5 gold, maybe he eats for a day. Maybe he can. He's healthy. He's healthy enough to work. And you see him again. He saves your life. Something of that nature.
Yeah.
There is one thing I don't like, though. I'm not sure exactly how to go about what I want to see for consequences, but one thing I don't like is when players can't influence multiple events. Like, for instance, from a game that that a few of us played in, from He Who Shall Not Be Named.
I mean, gamed?
He Who Shall Not Be Gamed. My apologies. Too many books.
Copyright
We're not
infringement.
talking about Vladimir or whatever the hell.
Vladimort.
Yes, Vladimir. Anyways,
Sorry, my apologies.
Voldemort.
there you go.
But how in the game in the the undead game, we ran into a point where we had to go to multiple places to gather artifacts or people to help fight against the undead. But in every area, there was a time limit that he had set in his head to where if we didn't do something, then that place would have been destroyed or things would have been lost.
I think it's because He Who Shall Not Be Gamed just wanted to have his world kick our ass constantly. Because every single time I did something, I was made fun of, I was beaten up on that in that game with you,
Yeah.
and even you got your ass kicked a lot too.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just really inappropriate. But was it an inappropriate consequence, or is it just he set the consequences too high?
I think he was just a sadistic person.
He probably just set him too high on purpose, just because he knew he could.
His pseudonym was Jigsaw. He's like, let's play a game.
A game that you never want to play.
Yeah.
But what I meant by that is like set time limit consequences.
You're talking about a time bomb?
Yeah, time bombs. Having
Yeah,
multiple time bombs.
Yeah,
and-
I have two things: time bombs and landmines. Those are plot point ideas. A time bomb goes off in a particular amount of time, saying 5 sessions, or in game 2 years. Landmines are events that it happens when you stumble across them.
Like
Yeah.
my time bomb with Towerport, how it was sacked. Like, it was in Nimble, like, all right, after like a week or so, I'm gonna have this town sacked. Once they've left, they'll hear about, oh man, we just escaped a burning town. But if I have a time bomb, I'll have a couple time bombs in my game. But I'm not gonna make them to where like
You can't survive.
Since you guys did not do this arbitrary thing that was halfway across the world, the game's over. You guys didn't discover the moon was crashing into the planet. Now you have to start over. It's like, it's Majora's Mask. Like, I don't.
Oh, well, that's what that giant face is. Huh?
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
I hate that kind of stuff. That's why I hate about that campaign. It's like,
Yeah.
it's unfair.
You didn't arbitrarily move this egg from the leftmost portion in the carton to the rightmost, so therefore the moon crashes and everyone dies.
Yeah, the world ends. Yes.
All right, here's a good example of something too. Also, the consequences based on society. I ran that one short game of Chin the Warring States, and that game was fun. But also there was a point where you guys were trying to find this almighty demon who was plaguing a town, and he killed an herbalist because the herbalist had a region that you guys needed. What are you guys doing?
Loot his body.
You looted his body, looted his shop. Well, if you take a look at Chinese history and lore, if it's bad luck and very dangerous to loot the dead,
Yeah.
because they might get angry and come back, and he did immediately. All his body parts started attacking you guys. I mean, you got like boa constricted by his entrails and his head.
See, now I know what you're going off of. Okay, now you want to go off of like cultural, like social aspects, like what defines people who are of the social norm and define of deviance when it comes to consequences. Because we live in America, we have a different view of what would be considered like cultural norms. But now if you take into an Asian culture where you have like filial piety and things of, more honorable and respect natures, could be a whole drastic different view of how you might interact with people socially. Not doing proper, say, names and affixes to people's titles. Like, if you're in Japan, if someone's a teacher, sensei or senpai, But being in America, we're just like, hey, Mr. Crowley. Like, we're not, things like that. And that
We don't have honorifics.
They do not. And you would have consequences for that. You might, like, the teacher might hit you with, like, a bamboo stick. Like, bam! No. You give the respect due to me as a person in this society.
Well, yeah, it's culture and society.
So now we've gotten cultural consequences out of the way. Still, like when you implement them, you have to be very, very delicate that you're not actually punishing the player.
Yeah, it's finding the right amount.
There's also a limit to how much knowledge your players can have as to what the consequences might be, which is a big thing. Like, do they know the law? Do they have, ranks in some sort of skill that gives them insight into
How
that?
high-
Is their intelligence?
Yeah.
Do they know that, stabbing and murdering an old man who's feeble and crippled and, he works with children, murdering him in the streets is a bad thing? How do you know? Besides common sense. There's no common sense in games. That's the thing. It's a big myth to say common sense will bring you over a consequence, because you don't necessarily know everything the character would know.
No. Well, I'd say, like, ignorance is never an excuse, but in this case, it actually might be. Because someone might not know, like, Asian culture, for instance, if you run, like, an Asian-themed game. So the player shouldn't be punished because his character actually might know the social norms because he grew up in that culture.
Right.
But the player out of character might not know the proper social norms. So you shouldn't punish him for that because he doesn't know.
As far as consequences are concerned, I really don't. What's the word?
But we might need to do our last
Yeah.
the
Well,
last roundabouts.
So we're going to start with Cook.
Yeah.
okay, like I was saying, the last thing is when you do these consequences, you have to maintain that you're not actually punishing the player. It never hurts for a player to ask the DM, would I know that? And they can say yes or no. It's not requiring a roll. It's like, would that honestly be, result in some sort of consequence? Because that's the only way the player has to interact with the potential consequences that will arise.
My thoughts on it are, if a player can overcome, I think that that with consequences, a player should always have the chance to overcome something that came back to bite him. And if he does, it just ends up benefiting him even more in the end. So even bad consequences can come out to play for good, play for the good. But as long as he plays his cards right.
I would, not to ride the coattails of these two, but agree on both points with them. One, with Cook, I like that, ask, would I know that? Like, if your character grew up in that society, you might not know that out of character, but in character, your character would, because he's like, I spent 21 years living here, I should know the tea ceremony. And also with you, redemption. Never just like, well, your players did some arbitrary thing earlier in the campaign, therefore it set their fate that they're predestined to die without any sort of way of getting out of it. Now, that's just messed up. Why would you do that? That's just sadistic. That is player dream. So,
Yeah. Well, I think that will do this for this episode. If you have anything that you want us to talk about, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Or you can email us directly at our Gmail account at justrolledalready@gmail.com. Have a good day.